Imagine being invited to your own daughter's wedding. That moment that should be one of joy and celebration, but instead turns into a nightmare. The story of Thomas "Tom" Reeves is one of those stories of pain, betrayal, and redemption. A father who, after years of estrangement and a fragile relationship with his daughter Alyssa, is surprised by an invitation that, instead of being a chance for reconciliation, puts him in the face of public humiliation. But what he didn't know was that that night held more than just the heartbreak of being ignored. It brought with it an unexpected twist that would change everything. The pain of being rejected, the silent struggle to win back the love of a daughter he loved so much, and the betrayal that came from where he least expected it. All of this mixed together in a night that seemed to be the end of any possibility of redemption. But could faith, courage, and perseverance transform this nightmare into something greater? Keep watching to find out how a father's love can be stronger than any challenge life throws at you. Before we dive into this powerful story, subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. And if you've been through something similar, leave a comment and share your experience with us. Thomas "Tom" Reeves never imagined that an invitation to his daughter Alyssa's wedding could be a trap disguised as a gesture of reconciliation. After years of estrangement, he received a simple letter, but it was loaded with indescribable emotional weight. Alyssa, who had previously pushed him out of her life due to a deep disagreement, was now inviting him to what should have been one of the happiest moments of his life. The invitation came as a double blow, a chance to make amends with his daughter, but also a painful reminder of how things had fallen apart between them. The letter contained no kind words, just a curt request, with the groom's name, James Carter, printed in the upper right-hand corner. "Please attend my wedding," it said. That was all. Tom stood there for a few minutes, the letter still in his hands shaking slightly. He wondered, was this a real opportunity for rebuilding, or a form of humiliation? For years he had tried to understand where it all went wrong, but he had never found clear answers. What he knew was that Alyssa didn't want him in her life, and now she was trying to pull him back. Or maybe it was just a superficial gesture, a formality to fulfill family protocol. But something inside him told him to go. Something was pushing him to this last attempt at reconnection. Maybe it was the hope of finding a place in his daughter's heart. Or maybe it was a last chance to show her that he would always love her, no matter the mistakes of the past. Tom took a deep breath and looked at the portrait of his family on the wall. It was as if that picture, where he still smiled, with his daughter, was from another life. He knew that nothing would be easy, but maybe, just maybe, this was the chance he needed to reconcile. With the decision made, he closed the letter and began to prepare for what would undoubtedly be an event that would change his life forever. The big day finally arrived. Tom dressed in his best outfit, a simple black suit that no longer fit him, as it used to. But he still wore it with the hope that, at least on that night, his daughter would recognize him somehow. He arrived at the church, an imposing building that seemed to reflect all the grandeur of that event. But for him, everything seemed oppressive. The feeling of being a stranger in his own story consumed him inside. He was there, but at the same time, he didn't feel part of that moment. As he entered, Tom's eyes searched for Alyssa. He found her near the altar, surrounded by friends and family. She was stunning, wearing a white dress that seemed more like a symbol of something he would never be able to achieve again, his constant presence in her life. But it was her gaze that struck him. There was no surprise, no welcome, just a slight tension, as if she were trying to avoid a confrontation that, for Tom, was far from being avoided. He realized that the invitation was not an attempt to get closer, but rather an allowance for him to be there, to be a spectator, not a participant. However, the biggest blow was yet to come. As Tom tried to get comfortable, James Carter, the groom, saw him and made a point of greeting him, but in an awkward way. The handshake was cold, and James's smile seemed forced, as if he were just fulfilling a formality. The gesture was brief, but enough for Tom to realize that there was more at stake than he imagined. James did not seem genuinely happy to see him there, and what Tom did not know was that his presence at the wedding was being observed with a look of contempt by more than one person. As the event unfolded, a feeling of unease began to spread through the air. The laughter was forced, the conversations tense. Tom did not know whether he felt more out of place or more disappointed with the situation. He had arrived there full of hope, but he felt himself sinking deeper with each moment. Every word exchanged, every gesture seemed like a hallmark of his failure. But what he didn't know yet was that the true test of his courage and resilience was about to happen, and he couldn't imagine how much it would change his perception of everything. As the wedding progressed, Tom began to realize that something was wrong beyond his own anxiety. In the middle of a toast, and while people chatted in the background, he was surprised by Alyssa. She approached him with a tight smile, which seemed more like a disguise than a true gesture of affection. She was radiant, but her gaze, although sweet, hid something else. Something that Tom couldn't immediately understand. "Dad, you came," she said, but her words didn't seem like a simple greeting. It was as if she were testing his patience, challenging him in some way. "I didn't know what to expect, but it's good to see you decide to show up after all this time," she added, her dry tone piercing Tom's soul. He felt like a stranger in his own story, a story he was trying so hard to leave in the past. "I'm grateful you invited me, Alyssa," Tom said, trying to hide the pain in his voice. "I want to be here for you, even if it's too late to make amends." Alyssa looked at him for a moment, as if considering his words. "I just want you to understand one thing, Dad. What happened between us can't be erased like that, like it never happened. I'm not the girl you used to know anymore. I'm gone, and life has shaped me in ways you can't understand." With each word, she pushed him further away, as if she were building a wall between them, an invisible wall that Tom didn't know how to break down. She didn't seem to be there to seek forgiveness or offer a new beginning. What had seemed like a simple conversation about reconciliation was actually turning into a sort of trial, with him as the defendant. Tom swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger bubbling up in his chest. He knew his daughter didn't want to lose him, but her words reflected the opposite. It was as if she was trying to cut the last remaining ties, as if this would somehow free her. As Tom tried to process his daughter's words, the figure of James Carter, her fiancé, approached them. The tension in the air grew even more palpable, as if the atmosphere was about to explode. He looked at Tom with a smile, but the look in his eyes was clear. James knew exactly who he was, and he didn't seem to like his presence one bit. It was then that Tom began to realize that something much bigger was at play. Alyssa and James's behavior was no coincidence. There was a plan behind it all, a plan that he still couldn't fully understand. The night was progressing, and the ceremony seemed to follow its routine of formalities. Tom, now more distant from his daughter, took refuge in a corner of the room, trying to hide amidst conversations and laughter that excluded him, as if he were a spectator in his own life. Even with the presence of the guests, the emptiness he felt grew. He watched Alyssa and James dance with the sparkle in their eyes of someone who had finally found happiness. But there was something that bothered him deeply. James's behavior, although polite, was full of cordiality disguised as kindness. He seemed to want to keep up appearances, but Tom knew that it was not genuine. That was when the groom's best friend, Evan Scott, approached him. Evan was a friendly figure, with an easy smile, and seemed like the type of person who tried to keep the atmosphere light. He sat next to Tom, offering him a drink with a friendly gesture. "Are you having fun, Tom?" Evan asked, with a slight laugh. But the question sounded hollow to Tom, like a disguised attempt to make him feel comfortable. It wasn't a simple act of friendship. It was a way of observing, of gauging his reactions. Tom gave a forced smile. "I'm trying to get used to the idea of being here," he said, not wanting to show all the frustration he felt. "You know how it is. It's been a while since I've been to an event like this." He was speaking more to himself than to Evan, but his friend didn't seem to realize the depth of his words. "I understand," Evan replied, without interrupting the conversation. But then, the tone of his voice changed, and the conversation took a direction Tom hadn't expected. "You know, James wasn't too thrilled about you being here. He thought it would be uncomfortable for everyone." Tom was silent for a few moments, trying to process what he had just heard. His heart raced, and his surroundings seemed to fade away. Evan's revelation was like a sharp knife piercing his chest, causing all the pent-up anger and sadness to give way to an even deeper sense of betrayal. James, the man who was going to marry his daughter, had already judged and despised him before he had even had the chance to reconnect with Alyssa. "And you, what do you think about all this?" Tom asked, his gaze fixed on Evan. He was trying to remain calm, but the truth was eating away at him inside. Evan looked away briefly, as if searching for a more careful answer. He finally answered with a sigh. "Look, I can't say much, but maybe you should think twice before trying to rekindle anything with Alyssa. James, he has other intentions." What Evan meant by those words, Tom didn't know, but what he felt was that the lie was unfolding before his eyes, and he was at the center of something much bigger. Something that, in his heart, he didn't want to believe, but he knew was true. The night seemed to drag on, and the feeling of discomfort grew with each passing minute. Tom couldn't shake the thoughts that were swirling around in his mind. Evan's words repeated like an echo in his head. James Carter didn't want him there, and the daughter he loved so much was in a difficult position, trying to balance something that Tom still didn't fully understand. He looked at Alyssa again. She was in the center of the dance floor, her happiness radiant, but something in her demeanor seemed to disguise an internal struggle that no one else seemed to notice. Suddenly, everything changed. When Alyssa passed Tom, their eyes met quickly, almost as if a secret could no longer be hidden. She didn't smile, but her eyes carried a subtle sadness that Tom had never seen before. She approached him discreetly, as if trying to avoid being noticed. And, in a whisper that only he could hear, she said, "Dad, you need to know the truth, before it's too late." Tom felt a shiver run down his spine. The feeling that something was about to be revealed was palpable. "What are you trying to tell me, Alyssa?" he asked, trying to hide the anxiety that was growing inside him. She looked around, making sure no one was listening. "James, he's not who you think. I know him, Dad. He manipulates me, controls me. I didn't want it to be this way, but he has a very clear idea of how he wants my life to be. And he doesn't want you here." Her words fell like a bomb in Tom's heart. He looked at her, unsure of how to react. What did he mean? He didn't want to be here? Didn't want him, her father, present at this crucial moment in her life? Alyssa continued, "I wish you would leave. I know you'll hate me for this, but it's the only way to avoid more conflict. I can't take it anymore. He doesn't want you at my wedding, and I don't know what else to do." Tom felt a tightness in his throat. He didn't know if her words were a cry for help or an apology, but the truth was there, raw and raw. His daughter, the girl he raised, was trapped in a web of manipulation, and James Carter was largely responsible for it. "You have to get out of here, Dad," Alyssa whispered, almost crying. "If you stay, he'll do something worse." Tom looked at her, his heart breaking. He knew something big was happening, something he couldn't ignore, but at the same time, he didn't know what to do to help. He was faced with a profound dilemma. Should he confront James now and risk losing Alyssa for good, or should he leave, leaving her with the illusion that she was protected? But in his soul, something told him that if he left now, he would lose Alyssa forever. Tom felt the weight of Alyssa's words as if an avalanche had fallen on him. His heart was breaking, and a sense of helplessness consumed him. He wanted to believe that there was a way to solve everything, but the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place in a painful and irreversible way. The thing he feared most was right in front of him, and he didn't know how to act. As Alyssa walked away quickly, Tom stood still, caught between the desire to protect his daughter and the cruel truth she had just revealed. He looked around, and for the first time his eyes focused on James. The fiancé was there, talking with his friends and laughing, but his eyes, the same eyes that had greeted Tom earlier with indifference, were now filled with something else. He sensed that there was danger in the air, something that James was manipulating behind the facade of perfection. Tom took a step forward. He didn't know what he would do, but he knew he couldn't stand still any longer. He needed to confront. James needed to understand once and for all who this man was and why he was destroying his daughter's life. He walked over to where James was, his footsteps echoing in the hall like an announcement of an inevitable meeting. When he got close, James looked at him, his forced smile quickly disappearing. "Tom," James said, his voice soft but full of hidden menace. "Are you okay here? I hope you had fun. Our ceremony was a success, wasn't it?" He smiled, but it was an empty smile, like a mask. The coldness in James's voice made Tom realize that this wasn't just a clash of generations. It was a fight for Alyssa's soul, and he was losing. "I want to talk to you, James." "Now," Tom said, trying to control the anger that was rising inside him. He didn't know if he was ready for everything that lay ahead, but he knew he could no longer be subject to the manipulation of his daughter's fiancé. James looked at Tom for a moment, as if evaluating what to do. He looked around, seeing that his friends were still busy, and finally nodded, inviting Tom to follow him to a more secluded corner of the room. When they both reached that secluded part, James crossed his arms and looked at Tom with a disdainful expression. "What do you want, Tom? You know you're not welcome here, don't you? You may have been her father, but that doesn't mean you have any right to Alyssa's life." "Now!" James's words cut Tom like sharp blades. He took a deep breath, trying to stand his ground, but the pain of being rejected by his daughter weakened him. "What are you doing to her, James? You manipulate her, you control her, and now you're pushing me out of her life. I'm not a stranger. I'm her father, and you, no matter how much you want to, can't change that." James laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. "Do you think you can save her from me, Tom? Do you think Alyssa still needs you? She belongs to me now, and there's nothing you can do to change that. She's mine, and you're just an inconvenience, a bystander, and if you got involved any further, I'd make sure that it was the end of any chance of reconciliation between you two." Those words shocked Tom. He'd never imagined that his worst nightmare would be someone like James, a man who had not only won his daughter's heart, but who was now using it against him. He felt his anger rise, but something bigger in his soul kept him from reacting violently. He couldn't fight like that. He needed something stronger. On impulse, Tom took a step forward, looking James in the eye. "I'm not giving up on her. No matter what you do, James, I'm her father, and in the end, the truth will prevail. You can try to push me away, but you can't erase what we are. I'm going to fight for her, and you're not going to stop me." The silence that followed was heavy. James didn't know how to respond to those words. Tom stood there, stripped of everything he had left, with nothing left to lose. And as much as James wanted to control everything, he knew something had changed. Tom was no longer there to be bullied. After the confrontation with James, Tom walked away from his daughter's fiancé, but his heart was still in turmoil. He felt like everything he had built with Alyssa was crumbling before his eyes. She was trapped, not knowing how to get out of the situation she was in. Tom knew he had to do something more. It was no longer a matter of pride or simple reconciliation. It was a matter of saving his daughter from a life she didn't deserve, a life dominated by manipulation and control. That night, before the wedding took its final course, Tom decided he had to talk to Alyssa one last time. No matter what happened, he needed her to know the truth. He needed her to understand that, despite all his flaws, he would always be her father, and that the love he felt for her would never fade. He approached her, who was in a corner of the room talking to some friends. When Alyssa saw him, her eyes lit up for a moment, but then they went dark, as if she knew what was about to happen. She looked at him with a sad, almost resigned expression. "Dad, I can't take this anymore," she said, before Tom could say anything. "Alyssa, please, listen to me," Tom said, placing a hand on her arm, gently but firmly. "I know you're scared, and I know you're trapped, but you have to understand that this isn't love. James doesn't love you like I love you. He doesn't respect you. He doesn't see you. He wants you." Tom's words trailed off in a charged silence. Alyssa looked at him, and for a moment, it seemed like she was allowing herself to feel something other than fear. It was as if, for a second, she saw the truth in her father's eyes. But then her expression hardened again. "You don't understand, Dad. He's the only one who sees me. He's the only one who understands me. You don't know what it's like to be here, what it's like to be me. I need him, Dad. I can't leave this anymore." Tom felt a tightness in his chest, as if he were losing her forever. "Alyssa, it's not too late. You can start over. You have the strength to get through this. I can help you. No matter what happened, you'll always be my daughter, and I'll always be by your side. But please, don't let him fool you. Don't let what he tells you fool you." She looked at him with a deep pain in her eyes, and for a moment, it felt like his words were touching something inside her. But then she pulled away, as if an invisible block was preventing her from accepting that truth. "I can't, Dad. I can't." And before Tom could react, Alyssa walked away, heading toward James, who was waiting for her with a smile. A smile that Tom now knew was just a facade. Tom stood there, staring at his daughter as she walked away from him, unsure of what else he could do. He had made his last attempt. He had shown her what she needed to see, but it was a fight she wasn't ready to fight yet. And as the wedding music continued to play, Tom felt the future he wanted for his daughter slip away even further. But despite the pain, he wouldn't give up. He knew he couldn't force anyone to change, but he also knew that a father's love never fails, and he still believed that one day she would come back to him. The clock ticked on, and Alyssa's marriage continued with the same superficial glow. But to Tom, every minute felt like an eternity. The emptiness he felt was deep, an emptiness that could not be filled by the laughter in the background, or by Alyssa's bright eyes that were now distant and cloudy. He felt that something inside her was still unresolved, as if there was a locked door in her heart, a door that he did not have the keys to open. That night, Tom did what he knew was the only possible act. He walked away, but not as a defeated man. He walked away as a father who believed in something greater than the pain he felt. He walked away, but with faith. Faith that, despite all the mistakes, despite the distance that had formed, love could still transform everything. Before leaving, he looked for Alyssa one last time, not to argue, not to confront, but to leave something with her, a legacy of unconditional love. He found her in the corner of the party, alone, looking into the distance, as if she were lost in thoughts that Tom could not access. "Alyssa," he said softly, his voice filled with a calm he rarely felt. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll ever be the same again, but I want you to know that you're my daughter. And no matter what happens, I will always love you. There's nothing you can do, nothing he can do, that will take that away from me. My door will always be open to you. You'll never be alone, because in my heart, you are, and always will be my little girl." Alyssa looked at him, and for a moment, Tom thought she might say something, make a gesture, but instead, she just nodded, her eyes filled with a sadness he never thought he'd see. "I know, Dad, but right now I need to live my life. I need to do it alone." Tom knew there was nothing he could do, but as he looked at her, something told him that this wouldn't be the last time he saw her. He had done what he could, and the rest was in God's hands, in the faith he still held in his heart. He took a step back, before turning and walking slowly away, knowing that although the distance was painful, it was the only way Alyssa would truly find her way. As he walked to the door, thoughts invaded his mind like a wave. He knew that deep down, no matter how much he wanted to control the situation, what really mattered was Alyssa's will. He had done his part. He had shown his love, his courage, his faith. Now it was up to her to choose what to do with it, and that was how Tom Reeves walked away from that marriage. Not defeated, but with his head held high, with the certainty that somewhere down the road his daughter would understand. A father's faith and love never fail, not even in the worst of storms. All he could do was trust in the time and patience that only true transformation could bring. Sometimes life presents us with moments so painful that the only option we have left is to trust. To trust in the love we feel for those we love. To trust that, even when words seem in vain, what truly matters is the intention to not give up. The story of Tom, Alyssa, and James is more than just a story of betrayal and family conflict. It is a lesson in the resilience of the human heart and the immeasurable capacity of a father to sacrifice himself for his daughter, even when all seems lost. Tom may not have changed his daughter's fate that night, but he gave her something that perhaps she needed more than anything else. The certainty that unconditional and true love does not fail. He let her go, but in doing so he also freed her, so that one day, in due time, she could once again choose the path of truth and reconciliation. Now, I leave you with a question. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved, even though you knew it was necessary for their growth? What would you do in Tom's shoes? Sometimes the greatest act of love is exactly the one that hurts the most. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and forgiveness. Sometimes, the simple act of sharing can be the beginning of the transformation someone is waiting for.